Hi, excursionists. I just wanted to give a quick disclaimer today. This is the conclusion of Greener Pastures, but this particular episode deals with some themes that are not appropriate for all listeners. I'll put some information in the show notes, but listener discretion is advised. Welcome to Into the Night. I'm Nari, your guide on today's excursion down a twisted path. Be careful not to get lost. Be it dark or light, it's easy to lose your way. Are you ready? Then let's begin. Charlie tried to comfort his owner, but Meg was so anxious that it was no use. I'm sorry, Charlie. I can't even stand to be touched right now. Everything is crashing down around me. At 10 o'clock, Meg rose from the couch to freshen her makeup and her hair. She changed into a light blue sweater to combat the late October chill. Double-checking herself in the mirror, she sighed. I'm as ready as I'm ever going to be for this. She patted Charlie on the head, refilled his food bowl, and walked out the door. The moon loomed over the horizon, and a gentle wind caused the dying leaves to rustle and flit to the ground. The streets were empty as usual, and her footsteps tapped across the carport to her car. The Henderson farm wasn't far from where she lived, and she glanced in the general direction of the hayfield. The town seemed asleep, except for the Henderson residents as she drove to the meeting. When she arrived there, at least 20 cars sat parked in the yard along the street. She glanced at her phone. She parked beneath the willow tree growing next to the street, checked herself in the rearview mirror, and stepped out of her car. Carefully walking up the concrete steps leading to the front door of the 3-story farmhouse, she paused at the door. She gently knocked. When no one answered, she knocked once more. The door swung open. There, Jim Henderson and Frances Chastain stood with fake smiles plastered across their faces. Oh, Ms. Carter, it's so good of you to come. Please, step inside. Henderson turned to his wife, who mingled amongst a crowd of other school board members and their families. Doris, come introduce yourself. The slender woman with salon-dyed brown hair walked to the doorway to join her husband. So nice to meet you, Ms. Carter. I've heard so much about you. Yes, we all have. Mrs. Chastain extended her hand. Please join us. We've been expecting you. Frances Chastain introduced Meg to everyone in the room. Don't be shy. We've wanted to get to know our newcomer for some time, Rita Cornwell, another board member, assured her. We've been waiting for the right time to have you join us. Platters of finger food passed around the room, and Meg's hands shook as she reached for a small sandwich. There's no need to be nervous, dear. We don't bite. Chuckles erupted throughout the room as Rita laughed at her own clever comment. Mrs. Chastain smiled. We don't get much of a chance to visit with you when you stop by the pharmacy. She nodded at her granddaughter, Amber, who passed refreshments around. The girl brought a glass of punch to Meg. My grandma makes the best punch. Isn't that right, everyone? I hope you like it. Nods of agreement encouraged Meg to try it. Meg sipped it, smiled, and took a few bites of the food on her plate. Small talk resumed, and a few of the board members placed themselves in chairs near Meg to talk with her. Do you know why we invited you here, Ms. Carter? Randall Stillings leaned forward with his elbows on his knees. I know there's been some complaints, but I hope you will listen to what I have to say. The board members looked quickly back and forth between each other. Jim Henderson smiled. Why, yes. We would like to hear your side of everything. It's only fair to let you have a chance to defend yourself. I appreciate that. I was wondering if... The room spun slightly. Rita Cornwell patted Meg's arm. Is everything okay? I bet you're just a bit hungry. We know how stressful a new school year in a new town can be. Just look at you. You're thin as a rail and you haven't been sleeping well, have you? Meg regained her composure. I'm sorry. Yes, I'm sure it's just that I'm tired and hungry. Here you go. Have some more punch. You should try these. They're my grandmother's cheese ball recipe. Meg took a few more sips of the punch and ate a few more bites from her plate. She sat immobilized, listening to the board members as they talked about the importance of newcomers feeling like they were a part of the community. Don't let people tell you we don't like outsiders here, Meg, Rita told her. Why, they're the lifeblood of our community. We welcome you to Greenfield. Meg's arms suddenly felt heavy, and a wave of dizziness struck her once more. A soothing voice and the smell of men's cologne came closer. Here you are, Meg. Let me help you. Be a good girl and drink this down. Jim Henderson put his arm around her and held a glass of punch to her lips. There you go. Have a little more. You want us to think you're a good girl, don't you? Of course you do. He softly caressed her face. Meg nodded as another glass of punch was held to her mouth. The room spun, and she no longer felt in control. Frances Chastain took her by the hand and led her to a room in the back of the house. Let me help you put this on. You will feel so much more comfortable. We want you to feel at ease with us. She felt her clothes slipping off, and before Meg knew it, she wore a flowing robe. Jim Henderson put his arm around her waist to steady her and walked her out the back door of his farmhouse. Ahead of them, the other guests were all wearing robes and made their way down a path. As they walked, they sang a familiar chant. The partygoers carried lanterns into the middle of the hayfield where they formed a circle. Drums played and the chanting quickened in pace. The people swayed and writhed under the October moon. Part of Meg wanted to resist, to run. But instead, she was swept up by the pounding of the drums, the haunting sound of the voices, and the whirling of their bodies as they danced. Someone, maybe Henderson or another man, led her into the center of the circle. He spun her around and around and around, and dizziness overtook her. She collapsed onto the ground. The music quickened, but the melody changed slightly. Meg no longer wanted to run. She wanted to belong. More than anything, she felt drawn to this crowd, to this night, to this field. The moon loomed large above her head. The crowd of dancers parted, and Frances Chastain entered the center of the circle. But she was no longer Frances Chastain. She was the high priestess who had lived on those green fields for centuries. She was the mother. Meg was entranced by the mother, whose whispered incantations swirled through the air as the robed dancers spun around. She watched the old woman's lips say the words that Meg now yearned to belong to. Unable to move, Meg's very spirit reached to meet the mother, who raised the blade into the night. The pounding of the drum abruptly ended with the sacrifice they all, including Meg, longed for. As her red blood surged into the blackened dirt of the field, cries of exultation went up from the dancers. They rejoiced in the resurgence of the mother's youth, and in the promise that their fields would remain greener pastures. Thank you for joining me for Into the Night, an anthology series written by Caroline Giamanco, narration and sound design by Nari Kwak, theme music by Nico Rodriguez, all original music and editing in part provided by Flyboy Entertainment. You can find our links in the show notes. Please remember to like and subscribe, and if you enjoy what you hear, please leave us a 5-star review to help other excursionists to join us. You can find us on your favorite podcast directory. See you next time. And remember, whether in the shadows or in the daylight, all twisted paths take you into the night. Into the Night is a Creative Typo Entertainment production.